Welcome to VidZette, your home for careful consideration of our common concerns. I'm Dr. Ted Noel, and this is our sixth live event. If there are any sound quality issues, please make a note of them in the discussion side, and I'll see what I can do to correct them. Before we get going with the topics for today, there are a couple of news items that are worthy of our consideration. In particular, Rasmussen Reports now has President Trump at 50% approval among all comers. That's 50%. He's never been that high in their view. And when you look at all of the surveys that have been done, the left-wing stuff tries to push him down, and he just keeps getting better and better as people discover that the country is getting better. People are getting jobs, and the rest of good things are happening. Along with that is the finding that his approval among the Black community is 35%. For decades, anything over 10 or 12% approval in the Black community was alarm bells for the left. So their ears should be ringing. Now, today I want to start with what else? Brett Kavanaugh. There is really only that one news story out there. And one of the key things to point out about this is something called Sutton's Law. Everybody goes, what is Sutton's Law? Well, Sutton's Law is named for Willie Sutton, a famous bank robber during the Depression. And famously, he was asked, now, mind you, there's an argument as to whether he actually said this, but he was supposedly asked why he robbed banks. And the answer was, duh, because that's where the money is. Sutton's Law has become a statement of follow the money. Now, for the drier people among us, there is a Latin phrase, cui bono. It literally means who benefits. And so when you look at what's going on in the Kavanaugh circus, the benefit in question has everything to do with power, much less to do with money, although we now know that GoFundMe is being used as a money laundering mechanism for leftist supporters. Millions of dollars at $100, $50, $20 amounts are going in to make these people who stand up and say bad things about Kavanaugh, to make them feel good and help their wallets and whatnot. Helps their attorneys too. At any rate, as we look at Sutton's Law, we have Feinstein and Ford. Now, if you look at Dr. Ford, she has been a leftist from day one. So has Dianne Feinstein. Now, Feinstein, as the ranking member, hates the Constitution. She'll say something different, but the fact is she hates the Constitution because it says one thing that's really, really, really important. And in case I didn't say it strongly enough, it's a seriously important thing. Congress passes the laws. Regulators don't get to pass the laws. The courts don't get to pass the laws. Congress does. And oh, by the way, the Democrats can't get stuff they want through Congress. Medicare for all, to pick one easy example. So what do? They find ways to get regulators to do things, which happened all the way through on Obamacare. For example, subsidies were given out to people who weren't eligible for them according to the law. But, under something called Chevron deference, the regulator said it was intended by the law, therefore it's okay. Guess what? Kavanaugh and Gorsuch both have written against Chevron deference. So when we look at those things, we have really good reasons why the left hates Kavanaugh. They cannot stand the idea that the court would not write law or would not sign off on some unelected regulator writing law. Now, this brings us to a bigger question, which is actually what benefit does Feinstein get out of it? Well, if she can win on this and she can persuade the public that her view is what it ought to be, then guess what? They might get a majority in the Senate. That makes Dianne Feinstein the chair of the Judiciary Committee, and she can stick her thumb in Trump's eye. She can block every one of Trump's nominees from here till eternity, and there isn't a thing anybody can do about it. That's called raw power. And in this case, follow the money means follow the power, because Di-Fi stands to be the most powerful woman in the Senate. That's what she wants. It's not about dollars. She's already a millionaire, which she basically got from her husband. She's got plenty of money, but power is the currency she craves. So what does Sutton's law say? Who benefits? Follow the currency. And in this case, if she can win on Kavanaugh, it's a power trip. She has exercised her power. Has nothing to do with the benefits Kavanaugh. Let's look at another one. This Avenatti, the attorney, who was an absolute jerk, who brings up all of these things. First name, I think, is Julie Swetnick, who is now proven to be a serial liar. Well, if Avenatti had his way and Kavanaugh would win, would get wiped out, then Avenatti is part of the power structure. He wants the power. He craves it as much as anybody else. His 15 minutes of fame is largely expired, and he wants to renew his subscription. But actually, what he has done is he has suborned perjury, which brings me to the second point in Sutton's law. We have now followed the money. We find out what the currency is that Avenatti and Feinstein are actually dealing in, and here is the way to deal with it. In Feinstein's case, we know she got the letter from Dr. Ford. We know she sat on it. We know she leaked it to create this situation. There is an implied timeliness standard in the rules of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and basically says that if you want somebody to be heard, you have to bring their message into the calendar so that they can be heard in a timely fashion. Di-Fi just totally subverted the calendar. That's unethical. And the proper response to this is for the ethics committee to say, sorry, you can't serve on that committee because of what you did. Now, will they? Different question. But if you bring her up on an ethics charge with the potential of knocking her off of the committee, you've all of a sudden placed her at risk. Before this, she had no risk whatever. There was nothing to worry about. If she failed, she comes back and tries it again. An ethics complaint, and oh, by the way, the FBI is investigating her on the leak issue. All of a sudden, people who behave badly there, thinking there's no downside, just will come at it again. If you take away their marbles, all of a sudden, they can't play the game. And the game is what they want to do. They want to be in the game. They want to win the game. Nothing else matters. America doesn't matter. Is Di-Fi one of the most powerful people in the world? That's what matters. She'll say all kinds of things so she can stay powerful. But if we can take away her marbles, all of a sudden, maybe the next person up won't be so anxious to play games with the rules. As for Avenatti, the proper way to deal with him is, guess what, Mr. Avenatti? You brought up Swetnick, who is a serial liar. You knew it. You didn't check her out, and you put her testimony up front under penalty of perjury. Guess what? That's called felony as a an officer of the court, which you are as a lawyer, when you induce someone to lie to the court or to lie under oath, you have violated your trust. And guess what? The Crossbar Hotel has room for you. We can take away his marbles too. Okay, let me look at the notes for a moment. Yes, Di-Fi had a Chinese spy. That's a separate issue and could also be helpful. And the issue of a true Supreme Court. Our real problem is that we've made the Supreme Court too powerful by bringing up too many things to it. If we actually limited the functions of the federal government to those things that are permitted to it, the Supreme Court would be much less powerful. We wouldn't have kill or be killed going on in the committee. Okay, one last thing I want to talk about on Kavanaugh, and that's a presumption of innocence. The Bill of Rights says that a defendant in a criminal trial is innocent until proven guilty. The problem here is what we have gone through is not a criminal event. It started as a job interview, then it was an adversarial hearing in the Judiciary Committee. But our entire system of life, not just governance, of life in the United States, is unique to the entire world history, and that is the innocence, the assumption of innocence until guilt is proven, is central to what we do. Everywhere else you bring an accusation, off with their head. Here, you have to prove your case, and if you come in and lie, we can take away your freedom because you lied to attack someone else. As a matter of fact, guess what? We get that from Jewish law, ancient Jewish law. Go back and read your Torah. You'll discover that's where it came from. So what we have is basically a due process issue. And remember, students at colleges, many, many men have been thrown out of college because somebody accused them, even years after the fact, of rape, when in fact, the boy and the girl were both at a party. They were both drunk. They both went at it, and the girl got second thoughts later on. I'm not approving that action, but the fact is it wasn't rape. And only recently have we seen the Department of Education say, you're not going to have this accused, therefore guilty standard. And while we're thinking of it, remember that there are a number of cases of false accusation. Anybody remember Tawana Brawley? Anybody remember the Duke lacrosse team? Both of those were false rape accusations. And if anybody has any questions, let's talk about Keith Ellison. His girlfriend has video and tape audio recordings and a timely police report against him for a nothing. It's crickets. One of theirs, oh no. Harvey Weinstein sure will knock him out. He's expendable. But Ellison, no, he's too important to us. All right. Let's take a moment. I have a little water here. All right. Why specifically do they not want Kavanaugh? There is all sorts of hysteria being whipped up about abortion on demand. Now, I'm not going to come at this as a Christian theologian, even though I am a Christian theologian. I want to come at it as a doctor because I want to make something very, very clear. And the funding of Planned Parenthood comes into this question. What is abortion? Abortion is literally termination of a normal pregnancy. Now, there are such things as spontaneous abortions. That's where the body spontaneously terminates a pregnancy. The most common cause of this is chromosomal abnormalities. But occasionally a normal child is aborted by the mother without her consent. And we have a situation of something known as an an habitual aborter where a woman cannot carry a pregnancy, and we have a procedure called a cerclage where we prevent the cervix from opening, and that way she can carry the baby until term. Those events, spontaneous abortions, are not what Roe versus Wade is about. Now, by the way, Roe v. Wade is a horrible piece of law. Any honest legal scholar will tell you that it's just terribly decided. But it is also stare decisis. That means we let the decision stand unless there is a specific case that comes up which challenges part of Roe v. Wade. And the left is petrified that Kavanaugh would rule against Roe v. Wade. I mean, after all, we had a conservative court overturn in the Janus case previous cases on union representation. In the Janus case said, guess what? You cannot be forced to be a member of a union that promotes a political view you don't agree with. That's called compelled speech, and the First Amendment prevents it. The left went nuts. So when we look at this, we say, okay, what about Roe v. Wade? Well, medically, you could call this cosmetic gynecology. And before somebody gets all wound up, think about it for a minute. It is a surgical procedure done for non-medical reasons. Oh, let me translate that for you. Abortion is not healthcare. It never has been healthcare. It never will be healthcare. It is not healthcare. It is best and most politely described as a lifestyle choice. What it means is I want to play around. I want to have all the sexual fun I can have. And if I happen to get pregnant, I want to be able to get rid of the baby so it doesn't interfere with my life. Now, Roe v. Wade was very clear that abortion after 24 weeks was not necessarily approved of by the court. And the reason was they talked about a threshold of viability. We now have that threshold of viability moved back to 20 weeks or even 18 or 19, depending on how good your neonatal ICU is. But the fact is, it's still a human life. And you are terminating a human life because you want to. That's cosmetic. If I want to get a facelift to get rid of some wrinkles, get rid of these wrinkles up here, that is a choice. There's no medical reason why I have to get rid of the wrinkles in my forehead. I just don't like the way they look. It's like me going to, well, I don't go to a manicurist, but suppose I went to a manicurist. It's like me going to a manicurist, get my nails done, or like my wife doing it. It's a lifestyle choice. It's not medical care. And anybody who says it's women's health care is lying to you. Enough. I have ranted far enough on that. Remember that in 2014, we had 650,000 abortions roughly in the United States. And the incidence among blacks per capita is triple that among whites. Margaret Sanger wanted euthanasia. She was a eugenicist. She wanted to choose a master race, and the blacks weren't it. So she started Planned Parenthood in large measure to try to abort as many black babies as she could. Okay, let me take a moment here. True Supreme Court. Term limits on Senate and Congress. That's worthy of a whole discussion on its own. I heartily agree. If term limits on the presidency are a good idea, then the term limits on Senate and Congress are just as good idea. And by the way, if you can't write the rules well enough to make them clear for the regulators, you need to go back and rewrite. Duke Lacrosse, I mentioned, Rolling Stones. Jeff mentions, I don't believe it has anything to do with abortion. It has all to do with keeping the Dems in power. There's no reason you can't have both reasons. The specific reason has to do with the going at the abortion. And that brings up a key point. In the leftist universe, you have two classes of people. You have the rulers. Remember Nancy Pelosi when there was the big election that brought her in as speaker. She said, "We will be ready to rule on day one." That was her language. We'll be ready to rule. And the key there is they consider that ruling is their right. The proper task is governing, not ruling. So when she says ruling, we're in deep doo-doo. But this is where the Democrats want to be. And the leadership in the Democrats want to rule. What about all the people on the street who are out there beating people up, carrying signs, tearing up other people's signs, all that? There's a term for them. It's called useful idiots. The people who are ruling will never do anything for them, but they'll make the noise so the useful idiots keep doing things, keep electing them, even though they never do anything for them. And think about the black community. The black community has been a wholly owned subsidiary of the Democratic Party since the days of Lyndon Johnson. And he was flat out, he was a racist from day one. And he flat out said, now I'm semi-quoting him, but I'm going to use some language here that was his language. He says, if we give those niggers something that they have to come to us for, they will come to us for it forever. Remember, that was his language. He chose to use that word about them. He didn't think anything good about them. He hated them. But he wanted their votes, and he wanted to make them Democrat voters forever. And he was successful until Donald Trump actually did something. You see, the Republican Party could have done something every time it had a chance. Instead, it did absolutely nothing to help the black community. Donald Trump has helped the black community, and that's why his approval is better. Term limits or age limit on the Supreme Court. First of all, term limits would have to be a constitutional amendment. So store-bought teeth. A constitutional amendment, as would be a limitation on the terms of Supreme Court justices. And when you talk about age, I know you're thinking of the notorious RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And, you know, as much as we would like her to retire, it's unlikely unless her health gets so bad that she has to and everybody else says, time for you to step aside. And right now her health has been fairly decent. We can argue about her head. That's a different question. She has been injudicious at times in things that she has said. And, oh, by the way, just like Kavanaugh liked beer, she had some wine before the State of the Union. That's why she fell asleep. Duh. Okay, let me deal with one last thing. When we talk about the left, you hear them talk about, I need you to hear my truth. You've heard the term. Dr. Ford has to get her truth out. Julie Swetnick has to get her truth out. No, they don't. Because Dr. Ford does not have her own truth. Truth is true, whether I like it or you like it or nobody likes it. It's still true. In verbal terms, truth is a statement that accurately reflects the demonstrable state of affairs. So if we talk about Dr. Ford's argument, she made a statement that said Brett Kavanaugh assaulted her and she gave details. Okay? That is her story. That's not her truth. It's her story. And until we have other evidence, we cannot assess whether it is true or not. She gave 4 witnesses to talk about it. None of them are willing to corroborate any part of her story. That says that her story has a problem. When Kavanaugh went the other direction, we find that he has numerous witnesses to support him. And even the ones that said, I saw him stumbling drunk, loud and abusive, never said, well, I saw him pass out drunk, or that I saw him do anything to Dr. Ford. So there are zero witnesses against or for Dr. Ford, and zero against Judge Kavanaugh. So what do we have? We have two stories. Now, we cannot say that either story is absolutely true, because none of us were there to absolutely look at it. But to the standard of proof that's the best we can do, which is evidence presented, or stories, I should say, presented in the committee, followed up on by the FBI, there is zero evidence to support Dr. Ford and adequate support for Judge Kavanaugh, which says Judge Kavanaugh is most likely correct. But when we talk about your truth or his truth, no. You are dealing with postmodernist psychobabble. There is no other polite way to put it. Because when somebody says, oh, this is my truth, no, it's not. You may believe something, you may have a story, but if it is not representative of demonstrable facts in the area where we can prove it, it ain't truth. So get out of my face. You say your truth. No, truth doesn't give a rip. Now, let me give you a good illustration. One of my favorite ones when I'm teaching in theology classes, we talk about truth and postmodernism. And let's look at a baseball game. If we have a baseball game, you have an umpire behind the plate who calls balls and strikes. And you have a naive realist who says, if it's a ball, I call it a ball. If it's a strike, I call it a strike. And then you have the postmodernist who says, they ain't balls or strikes till I call them. Then you have to look at what we can actually do. And this is the practical realist who says, I call them the way I see them. And that's what we have to do for almost everything in life. And basically what it says is we approach a question in life by saying, what matches our experience? What matches the evidence on the ground? And we go from there. Democrats don't care about that. All they want is raw power, and they will lie through their teeth to get what they want. All right, we got a couple of minutes. Let me look at some comments here and see what we have. All right, we've talked about term limits. Welfare state has become the new Democratic plantation. Absolutely, I would agree heartily with that statement. McCain didn't retire and should have. I published some stuff on that saying that. How can the notorious RBG hear cases when she sleeps during oral arguments? I don't know that she does, but we'll see. Did I read Ford's ex-boyfriend's letter? Yes, I did. And it was very clear. She had no fear of flying. She had coached someone on how to handle a lie detector test. And oh, by the way, she said that she had all of this stuff about putting a new door in her house in 2012. Building permits and photographic evidence show that it happened in 2008, not 2012. We also know from state licensing that she operated a psychology clinic out of her house. The second door was for the addition that she put in that got used first for a renter and probably contrary to zoning laws for her office. So she has some state violations involved there, and she has committed perjury. And back to the point I made, we need to charge people with perjury when they do perjure themselves. And there's a very good reason for it. It's not just to punish, it's to prevent people from raising false things, to testify falsely, because there's no downside to it. If there's a very real downside to testifying falsely, then people are going to be careful about what they say. I'm not going to talk about the Council on Foreign Relationship and Agenda 21. I've read a little about it, and just not going to go there. There are a lot of these conspiracy theories. Some of them have a grain of truth. They're just not things I'm going to deal with because there are other people who can deal with them better than I can. I'll just leave it to them. Not going to say anything bad about you. You wish I was asking the questions at the hearing. Actually, I don't think you'd want me at the hearing. I'm not that good of an attorney. I have had enough exposure to know what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. And as the line goes from Cool Hand Luke, a man's got to know his limitations. All right. Well, I thank you so much for watching. For those who are looking back in at this and replay, please remember to like VidZette on Facebook, follow VidZette on Twitter, and to support VidZette at Patreon. Until next time, I'm Dr. Ted Noel. Thanks for watching.